Welcome to another track guide for the Dead Internet Racing League. This is the Mustang Challenge Series, where we try to replicate the Dark Horse Racing Series as best as possible. Power's at 95% with a 100-pound weight penalty. The car has no traction. Car's fairly loose, but let's go ahead and jump into it real quick. We got a 12 p.m. Session time. This is the league server session, so this should be what we see when practice starts, not when the race starts. So when you jump in the league session, these are the conditions you're going to find to be able to compare to. 72 degrees, 57% humidity, 7-mile-an-hour winds. So let's go ahead and get into it. So 135.8. Let's go ahead and get into the guide. So turn one, I'm braking just after the Dunlop bridge goes out of view. I have the bias. It takes a long time for these tires to warm up. It's a good 3 or 4 laps before you're in the green zone. I normally have the bias up when I'm on cold tires. I have the bias up around 61.5, give or take. But as the tires come into temperature, I dial it down. This was I found a happy medium. But I'm going to brake just after the Dunlop bridge, and I'm going to try to hug the apex as tight as I can. Because this car without traction control, since there's a lot of hairpins around this track, and the track is rather slick, my main focus is to get my rotation as fast as possible so I can unwind the wheel and be back to power more aggressively and be to full power sooner. So I usually take a more tight line through everything here. Get my rotation back to power. Carry it nice and tight, and I'm not going to push out too wide here because I want to set myself up better for what would be, I think this is technically turn 2. So instead of pushing out wide and having to cut all the way back across the track, I'm going to still keep it tight. And as soon as I can unwind the wheel enough, back to full power, slight brake just to get the car starting to rotate in. I'm not going to hold it very long. This track and this car, you can apply a little bit of brake, and the car will just, the back end kind of wants to kick out around here. If your bias is too low, and you're giving a decent amount of wheel input with some brake, the rear end can catch out. So that's generally why I keep a little bit higher bias. But I'm going to maybe 40% brake around. What would that be? There's really no good marker. Just before this stand right here is when I'm applying brake. And I'm going to apply and then let off and just kind of coast through the corner, modulate the throttle to keep the back end. I don't want to be off throttle. I want to have some throttle at play, not only to keep momentum up, but to keep the back end kicking out a little bit. I want to still get some rotation without being on brake at this point. Push out wide. It's probably about as far as you want to go. If you do hit the gravel, it will slow you down. So this wasn't enough to really slow me down a lot, but it was, in the grand scheme of things, maybe a fraction of a tenth by the end of the straight coming up. Cut this as straight as you can. And when this section of the track jets out to this point, this is your braking point. You're going to brake right around this point right here. And same as turn one, you want to keep a very tight line through this apex. You can overshoot this and lose so much time and momentum up out of the corner. So I like to brake just after. Preferably, you can brake just before or right at to be safe. I broke a little bit deep here, but a safe spot is at this peak right here. That's your braking point. You'll never overshoot this turn. Keep it nice and tight. Get on throttle pretty aggressively. It's not too bad, but it's up and out of this corner. There's a bit of a dip in the road as you're coming up and out. Right there, that little dip, sometimes if you have too much wheel input at this point, the back end will want to kick. It doesn't really throw the car sideways, but it can lose some traction on a very important part of the track. This is probably going to be the biggest overtaking spot, pending no just spins, but this is going to be where I think a lot of overtakes will take place. Getting a good drive out of this corner is key. I want to brake just before the 100 board. Actually, there is this beam right here is thicker than the rest. That's what I'm looking at. As soon as it's crossing my screen, I'm starting to be on brake. This is where I want to be on brake, right here. I'm going to brake straight. Keep loose hands on the wheel. If you have a very tight grip and you're starting to turn in, the car is going to want to put more stress on what would be the left front tire, and it's not going to want to stop as quick. So generally, under braking, you want soft hands. Let the car do its thing. I'm going to trail off and keep this very tight. I'm going to keep this as tight as I can possibly get, because if I push out too wide here, I've got to cut all the way back across the track. And when this car has no traction control, trying to cut back across the track with any throttle is going to spin you. So keep this as tight as possible. Back to full throttle. Hit second, crest the hill, start your braking at this point. It will allow you don't need much brake. You don't need much brake at all, but you want to get the car slowed enough, a little bit of a cut here. So as soon as you crest the hill, brake, cut in, you can cut a little bit of curb there, and you can actually push out fairly wide here. I think tires over here is an off track, but you can use all of this track right here and even this on entry to your next corner. See, I used all of it there. That just opens up the arc of this corner. You're able to carry more speed. and be able to get to power with less wheel input and rotation. So cut and pay attention to my throttle through this section, because without traction control, the car is going to spin if you're too aggressive. So I'm making my way through as making my way downtown, walking fast, blah, blah, blah. So I'm making my rotation, hopping the curb, starting to get on power, but I'm not full power yet. I'm not even full power until I unwound the wheel and I can go straight. Same thing here. Make my rotation in, slowly get back to power, but I'm not back to power until the wheel is basically unwound. It's very crucial on this track. The wheel needs to be as straight as possible before you really attempt to aggressively go full throttle. Here I'm going to brake around the 50 board on the right. I will sometimes use the overhang right here as a marker, but generally just I'm looking forward. I'm not paying attention to the actual 50. My eyes are not focused on the 50 board, but you can see it in your peripheral. So as you're coming up to it, once it feels like it's about to start entering or exiting your field of view, get on brake, go all the way down to first, same thing, hug it very tight, unwind the wheel, full power, light braking here, keep it very nice and tight. This is probably the turn that's going to get the most people out. It's very, very easy to spin here. You want some throttle at play to keep up momentum, but you don't want enough to spin the car. It already started to make a rotation there. I had to catch it, and I'm only at 75% throttle. But as soon as you can unwind the wheel, full throttle, you're going to cut this corner as much as you can. So what would be a good turn-in point? Starting my rotation just after this tower right here. Once the tower starts to leave your view, you can turn in. You want to cut this as much as possible. As much as possible. Not only because you can carry more momentum through, but you're actually able to go, you actually have an aggressive throttle out. So you watch my throttle. I'm back to full power at this point. If I'm making a later apex, I can't really do that, especially with no traction. And as soon as the car is about to exit the curbing on the left, so around the green right here, this is going to be my next braking point. It's not heavy braking, maybe 40-50%. Get the car slowed down to third or down to second. Keep that 1% trail. If you watch my brake trace, I'm keeping a little bit there just to keep the front end compliant and the car rotating. And as soon as I am exiting back to full power, and that is a lap around Okayama. So we have over a week until this race. So I recommend getting as much practice as you can. This track's going to be it's going to be something else. So good luck. Hope you enjoy.